We are already active in this market for longer than 10 years, I would say, in Asia, but not under BayWa, I would say. Market-wise, I can only say the same thing again, like my conference here. Thailand is let's say, was a front runner in Asia for the last years, and the role model, I would say, really under the adder to really with increasing numbers of solar. But after the slowing down in recent years, we see the most valuable projects rather than the CNI, and maybe some discussions, maybe to highlight, maybe in the hybrid sections, we can discuss during the panel discussions on hybrid schemes. So BayWa basically is developing, investing projects globally, executing projects, having installed so far 1.7 gigawatt globally in wind and solar, and also exploring now more and developing hybrid projects on a globally.
Thank you for that introduction, Kai. Just a reminder to anybody, if you've got a question, you can text it through to the number that's been provided and is now on the screen. So let's kick off. This is the update on the Thai market. So what do you think are the most important changes that have occurred in the last year? So update from this time last year. Let's have one each. What changes do you think are the most important? Let me start at this end where the microphone is, and we'll be more efficient.
Well, I would say from the last year, it's, again, the increasing interest and also execution in the CNI level because of increasing tariffs, which makes it, of course, more interesting, and also decreasing LCOE of solar.
So that's retail tariffs have gone up this year?
Yep. Okay. And the other thing I would say is the try to explore a little bit more in the hybrid sections, which I would think is not really that suitable for the Thai market.
Okay, so that's an international developer's perspective. And from the local developer perspective?
I think from local developer perspective, I think as a Thai, we see a lot of change during the past, let's say, decade. And recently, last year, not only the change in regulatory, but change in a lot in technology. So, well, it's not demand driven because demand always there, but the supply, because price has dropped at the grid parity, so it comes and it makes more sense for corporate to consume domestically by itself or self-consumption. So I think just only from year 2016 to 2017, in 16 I met a lot of corporate, try to convince them to install their own solar rooftop. I think I met at least 80 of them altogether. None of them signed with us, but just only recent months in this year. So I think a lot of things that holding back their decision was first pricing, technology, and also direction on the government policy. So right now, it's clear that there's no new issues on utility scales, and everybody be able to give out on, in the past, well, I talk back and forth, I'm sorry about it. In the past, tariff was so attractive. That's why investors are competing each other, and they gave out so much on their return on investment or their profit just to get that license. But since they find out there's no longer that available, right now they just be able to give out that kind of profit back to the real user or end user. So for us, this year we saw a price decrease more than 25%.
and is basically even breaching through barriers that are not quite perfectly regulated. So I think this is one item that we're looking out for as a developer, to have a clear regulatory framework, especially for C&I rooftops, that allow third-party developers to install equipment on commercial and industrial clients, own and operate them on the client's behalf, and sell the power under a power purchase agreement over the long term, generally between 15 to 25 years. This, at the moment, it is a bit of a gray area. Our understanding at the moment is that the Ministry of Energy and the political side is quite happy with the recent developments, because it is a subsidy-free driver for the solar market, which is, the largest in Southeast Asia, as Kai mentioned earlier. And it is important to make sure that there's enough growth and enough opportunities in the market to keep the companies that have been established and have been successful continue to thrive. On the other hand, the utilities, struggle with this approach. They see basically attractive large customers generating 20 to 30% of the energy through such off-balance sheet financed solar installations on the rooftops, and don't quite know how to address that. Obviously, they're worried about reduction in revenue, what's the impact on the rate there. And I think this is a struggle that will continue for a while, and it will be very interesting to see how the political side deals with that and basically puts a regulatory framework in place that allows this sector to move forward with confidence and without some of these uncertainties that might make especially investors uncomfortable at the moment.
So picking up on that, what is it about the tariff that is generating this uncertainty? Are there high avoidable transmission or distribution components within the tariff that you can avoid by putting solar on the roof? Because certainly that's one of the things that we've seen in some markets where you can avoid fixed charges that encourages solar with benefits that can disappear with the swipe of a pen if the regulator decides that they wish to change tariff structures. Is that a risk in Thailand?
No, I mean, the fixed charges are generally a small part of the electricity bills for commercial and industrial customers. So it is a pure on kilowatt hour basis reduction. Generally, you can maybe say how this is done, but most of the approaches that we've seen from other developers and ourselves is based on a floating tariff indexed to the prevailing utility rate. Say if the utility pays 3.5 baht or so, you give a 10% discount, 20% discount to that prevailing rate. So they save 10 to 20% on their electricity that they purchase through this power purchase agreement versus the utility rate. And this is on a pure kilowatt hour basis. What is relatively high is the peak rate, so during the day, during most of the day, which correlates very well with the solar production. So that is one of the reasons why it is a reasonably attractive way to provide savings to the clients even today without any consideration of fixed charges.
So there's no risk that the regulator might evaluate the way tariffs are done to impose fixed charges? Because that's certainly a discussion that's being had in other markets.
Sure. So that is always a risk. I agree with you. And if you basically spin that scenario further and see a very large installed base of multiple gigawatts on rooftops, certainly there would be a question, how do you deal with the fixed cost of the grid, which is still required, and the backup power basically that will be required to be provided to these clients in case of lower production from the solar side. How are those fixed charges being accounted for? And that is probably not accounted for properly in the current pricing structure. I think you're right there. And this is basically having a clear view, which I think is one of the things that I've been talking about for years. The most important thing is a clear long-term regulatory framework in order to allow developers, investors, and the whole sector to be comfortable in what the path forward is and basically align the business models accordingly.
Excellent, thank you. Maybe I can come back to Kai. I understand that there's a ongoing hybrid tender. Do you think this is progressing well, and do you think this is a future model for solar in Thailand?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think in terms of progress, I think so what even if we are not actively participating in the tender process, I think it's well in the progress, pretty much on schedule. I think what we understood from it, it's basically 2 weeks in delay, and it's at the moment it's still a technical qualification round. So basically we are looking there.
Maybe you can explain what a hybrid tender is.
So basically that's a SPP hybrid tender scheme. It's basically a bidding process under the ERC in Thailand with a total quota of around 300 megawatt. And it can be with the COD, which is quite long, let's say until 2021. So it's quite some time to develop these kind of projects. And it's basically for all regions, basically for all projects from 10 to 50 megawatt in capacity. So basically you can provide, at the moment the first stage is still ongoing. It's basically technical qualification on the bidders, if they can meet the requirements. The next stage would be more on the commercial side, which should be actually submission within the next 3 weeks until the 14th December. So you can expected tariffs around 2.58 Thai baht per kilowatt hour. That's roughly 7 cents, US dollar cents per kilowatt hour. So if you think about this in terms of completely new projects with solar, for example, solar and battery, it's quite competitive, and it's most unlikely that you will not be able to meet. But since this is quite, not restricted, or there's no requirements to the specific source of renewable energies, so it could be anything from biomass, biogas, or even existing projects which bring in the hybrid component with battery. And then of course you can come to a level which gets in this range, which makes it interesting, like 2.58 of Thai baht. So in the long run, it's rather something for the existing players in the market, and we know Thailand has a pretty strong biogas sector as well, which will play together with sugar mills, rice mills, and existing biomass plants, the key players in this model, basically. But as a future outlook, long run, I don't see this as a model for Thailand at all.
Okay. As a local developer, do you have any views on this tender?
I would say that we had a bad experience joining the bidding or tender for a tariff bidding scheme. So I think back in year 2016, last year, after being postponing a few times, the bidding happened in August. I remember that because I spent the whole year, and my team spent the whole year in the southern part of Thailand, the southern province of Thailand. You imagine that the very dangerous location, just to to secure on the resource and be able to participate on that bidding. The result came out very surprised the market that the discount was given as high as 80%. So I don't think anyone would be able to get that kind of award from that bidding scheme. So when it comes to this year on hybrid bidding again, so I just pulled out, and I think there's more opportunity on CNI market, which easier. Rather than I have to give up on profit on bidding tariff, I give back to the corporate who really want to consume and on their self-consumption. I think that's the thing on my part.
Okay, that's very interesting. I didn't actually know much about that tender, so that's fascinating. Now, do we have anyone from the audience who wishes to ask a question? Nobody's texted anything in. Okay, we will keep going. In that case, I get to ask all the things I want to know about, and the rest of you just have to listen to the answers. So tell me, let's turn to new technology, because we all know that technology is changing all the time. What sort of effect is the new technology having on the Thai solar market? You've got the mic, keep going.
I'm not a techie person, but my company is a young company, and being young, they're very dynamic. Last year, we implement the digital platform, since we know that the majority of consumption will go for end user. So implement the platform for mobile apps and web-based. So people can understand easily through simulation, to marketplace, and also monitoring. And this year, we got awarded by NIA, the National Initiative Agency, on our device called Solar Box. The device that be able to capture on the saving on each household. You don't need to put on solar yet, just to know your habits of consumption. And this year, after having the device, we built on top of it on blockchain, just to let them be able to verify each other on saving. So these are the technology that we implement on top of what we're doing on the CNI business. And I think it will expand the usage, not only for the corporate factory, but for every household in Thailand and region.
In general, for us, I would say that we're generally relatively conservative in our technical implementation, and that is mainly because there are significant regulatory challenges in a lot of the projects that we engage in, and in order to make the financing accessible, you have to take that approach, in my opinion. So one interesting item that we're exploring at the moment is a floating solar farm. This is something that has recently been quite widely developed, especially in China. Actually, manufacturing now is being provided by many more reliable players. There's a French company, Cialitaire, that is the market leader in this sector. They're actually starting to manufacture in Asia now, which we believe will have a positive impact on cost. And there are some, especially on the CNI space, there are a significant amount of opportunities in that space. So this is probably the most innovative project that we're pursuing.
You're going to have to explain to me how CNI can float. My memory of roofs is that they try not to be covered in water.
Yeah, they're not on the roof, that's right. No, I mean, basically many industrial facilities have, because of water management, either for rainwater management or water that is used in the production processes, a lot of them have, sizable ponds, depending on the industry they're in. And those can be used depending on what their primary usage is. They can be used for solar installation, so that's probably as far as we go. I do believe I see an overlap, which I don't see executed much, but you can see an opportunity there in the overlap between on-site generation and energy efficiency for corporate customers. Those go hand in hand. It's the same departments that deal with this. Normally the CO2 reduction targets for especially MNC corporates go along with energy efficiency targets. So I believe there's an opportunity for companies to collaborate, but at the moment this is still a very segregated space where there's a number of companies that's focusing on energy efficiency and others that are primarily focusing on solar.
Excellent. Oh, well, I assume that the floating solar would have the advantage in Thailand of reducing evaporation of these ponds as well.
Actually, can I add on energy efficiency? Actually, my company, the business model is divided into solar and also energy efficiency. When you say that segregate, actually, we are the company that doing that together. When we go to customer, especially on the corporate building, they tend to asking more on energy efficiency, and solar is some part of that. And having energy efficiency will provide better financing term from the bank for the owner. This is a good solution for them, which we applied right now.
Kai, do you have any technical wizardry
not really. I think we mentioned basically for us it's the same thing. Floating is a niche which I think has some potential to grow. What I see as well on the financial, which you mentioned as well, is blockchain might become in the future a huge opportunity for funding and financing CNI or any kind of project, which we see more and more of these fundings and blockchains popping up here and there. So it becomes quite interesting. Also, if you looking out later into smart grids opportunities, and I mean Thailand just recently also announced that they want to invest more into the smart grid to build this further up.
Excellent. Well, given that we're talking about Thailand, but we're sitting here in Manila, I think it would be probably interesting for the audience if you could each elaborate on what you think that the Philippines could learn from Thailand, the positives, the negatives. What would you say to that? You get the hot seat first, Kai, because you have the mic.
I've seen that coming. Well, it's quite. I mean, like Philippines is not really like Thailand. Philippines accelerated that what Thailand did in maybe 4 or 5 years. Philippines did already within a much shorter range in 2 years. Even like, let's say, with the stagnation we have at the moment, that not much happening rather on the rooftop. I think what would be a good advice would be a clearer structure for implementing the rooftop in terms of framework. That is something which I think Thailand is a little bit more in advance. It's a little bit more clearer than it's in the Philippines if it comes to rooftop implementation. CNI, I think that is in Philippines still a little bit where developers and investors are still walking a little bit in a gray zone area. They're doing it, but there are certain risks which you have to take in mind in investing and developing these kind of projects. Of course, ERC and regulatory still can come, so you have to bypass somehow kinds of regulations in terms of leasing concepts and so on. I think that's a little bit more clearer in Thailand. But on the other hand, it's like the same here. It's like also demand driven. So and there Thailand is maybe a little bit behind because of the tariffs. But I think that's something Philippines can still improve a little bit.
Yeah, I guess from what you said earlier, if they decide to raise all the tariffs here, that they can expect to see a lot more rooftops. What about you?
Okay, maybe I give one advantage that Philippines has over Thailand. I think geographically speaking, demand-driven should be significant, and improving technology since, well, I learned about the microgrid improvement technology, so I think this can be applied easily in Philippines. Other than that, I think PPA you already learned from Thailand. Transmission can be an issue because I know a lot of utility players from Thailand got, scarred out a little bit. So, but again, I think on the upper hand, you learn a lot from our experience, and also on demand driven. I think geographically you provide more opportunity here in Philippines.
Well, I think we do develop projects in the Philippines as well, and as I think some of the other developers, it is a bit frustrating experience in the last 2 years. I mean, for me, the main item that I think is lacking here is a political commitment. In general, I think some of the frameworks are here. There's what is called the contestable market, which should make it easier for large-scale CNI customers to acquire power from third parties. But the licensing and permitting behind that is extremely slow, and actually is on hold at the moment through a Supreme Court decision, which has been pending for, is it 9 months now? I'm not sure.
A long
Roughly.
time.
A long time, exactly. So, I think the market condition, the fundamentals are good, but on the actually regulatory and especially, in my opinion, political commitment, there's a clear lack, and I hope that is changed soon, because that would unlock the market very quickly, as we have seen last time. The right decisions were made, and you saw an explosion, with 500 megawatts on the grid after a year.
Yes, I believe that there's going to be 2 circulars on retail competition and open access coming out in the Philippines in November. At least that's what somebody from the DOE said in a renewable forum I was in last week. Well, we've got 9 minutes, so you are running out of time if you actually want to ask any questions about Thailand. So why don't we wrap up here with a final question. We've looked about the last year. Why don't you look about the future year? What are the key issues you see coming up? What are the key opportunities looking forward for the next year in Thailand? Florian.
So I think, as we've highlighted before, I think all of us agree that the CNI, the commercial industrial rooftop market, is probably the most attractive at the moment in the medium term. At this point in time, there is no clear program to proceed on ground-mounted solar in any shape or form that is on the agenda. For many years, large-scale, 50, 90 megawatt projects have been talked about with a potential bidding scheme, but none of that has been implemented. It might be possible that the experience that from the bioenergy and the hybrid projects recently will be used to execute a large-scale utility solar bidding scheme, which I think the market would be ripe for that. And we've seen, especially in India and other markets, that this can be very attractive, yield very good results in terms of power prices. But so far, there is no clear indication from that will happen anytime soon. So I expect at least 2 years before that will actually be implemented. None of the other programs, as far as I know, are looking to be extended. There was an agricultural co-op solar program, but my understanding is that is finished. The hybrid program, I do not believe that there's a second phase planned at the moment. So there's a little bit of uncertainty, and I think at the moment the policy side is seeing how the market can actually create a unsubsidized, a little less regulated solar market in the country. One thing that we would be looking for is a little bit of opening up of the utility side. Again, it's a regulated market with single buyer system where transmission and generation is controlled by PEA, EGAT, and MEA, the 3 utilities. We would like to see more transparency, especially in the utilization of the grid, access to information about the grid, especially when you look at storage opportunities. Without that information, it is very difficult to assess the potential of grid services and etc. that can actually today be executed on a commercial basis without any subsidies, as we have seen in other countries, AES examples from the United States, at very attractive prices, but without availability of that data for developers or consultants to assess that. I think it's very, very difficult to unlock that market.
In short to medium term, regulation on CNI should come in a sense that the government should open with avoided charge or any fixed cost. I think any consumer or any corporate willing to hear about that. Right now, it's still uncertain whether they put solar on their rooftop and be able to get synchronized with the national grid. It's an unclear issue. But once they announce that, well, there's going to be some charge, I think everybody open for that. That's the short-term element. For medium-term and long-term utility scale, I think subsidy is out of question. There will be no subsidy anymore in Thai market. But with improving technology, you can add on battery. You can sell as the firm to the government or to the national grid, and be able to participate in any government incentive zone like EEC, and also some smart city. You can provide some initiative on microgrid or off-grid into that kind of economic zone. I think that's another part that we anticipate. I think we anticipate this thing coming on next year from the government.
Thank you. And you, Kai?
Just to add one thing, what we in the short term also looking for is the execution of net metering next year. I think that would open up a little bit further the CNI, since any surplus we have, we can sell back to the grid to, I think, still quite attractive rate. In the mix, it's around 2.15 Thai baht, roughly around that per kilowatt hour. So it's still nice. So that means in terms of development of such projects, it will also shorten the terms of the time of development, because we don't need to really do such detailed load analysis anymore. Of course, you have to do this, but it's like not really that you need to have all the little details for that, because in the end you can also sell the surplus. So that, I think, in the short term will also enhance against one more time the CNI. Well, on the utility scale, I have not really much to add, because at the moment it's rather maybe a lot of assumptions. What is not an assumption, what we can see is that tariffs are expected to increase, and that goes back to that we maybe in the future, and not maybe, most likely in the future, we don't need any additional subsidies to make a solar project profitable in Thailand anymore.
Well, I think we'll wind it up there. Rarely do we have such clarity on a market. Thailand is a CNI market. There you go. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Thank you for the panelists for providing these insights on the outlook of the solar market in Thailand. Thailand and the Philippines are two interesting countries in ASEAN. Thailand started early, and as one of the panelists has said, took them about 5 years to get to the megawatt, to the gigawatt size installed capacity that they have now. And in the Philippines, it took us only 2 years. We started in 2013, and in 2016, we already have close to a gigawatt of installation, counting both utility scale and solar. Thailand started with solar farm, the Philippines started with CNI, and now Philippines is going back to the CNI and possibly also some utility scale with a new policy in place for 2018 and 2019. I think what's interesting in these two countries is that the feed-in tariff is already unclear in terms of its implementation. And both countries are trying to find their way into the energy space with less government intervention, but with clearer rules. That is, I think, where the Philippines is also. And we hope that we can find our path in 2018 so that we can, again, have that boosts as solar prices go down and as experiences build up.